While you were paying rent, 15 million people quietly did the math. 15 million Americans packed up moving trucks and left. Not for a bigger city, for the opposite. For open land, quiet roads, and a price per acre that sounds like a typo. Whole neighborhoods in the expensive cities are thinning out, and the places filling up are ones most people can't even find on a map. So here's the question that should bother you a little. What do these 15 million people know that everyone still writing a rent check every month doesn't? We went looking for the answer. We found 15 real places they're running to, with the real land prices and the honest catch on each one. And we're counting them down from 15 all the way to number 1. And the single most surprising destination on this whole list isn't warm, isn't famous, and isn't anywhere you'd guess. That's number 3. But first, we need to talk about why any of this is happening at all. Because this isn't a vibe. It isn't a few influencers buying ranches for the camera. This is one of the largest quiet migrations in modern American history. And it's being driven by 3 specific forces. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first force is money. Plain and simple. When researchers looked at why people moved, roughly 88% said they did it to save money. Not for adventure, not for a view. To stop bleeding cash. Rent in the big metros climbed to a point where a decent income still left people with nothing at the end of the month. And somewhere along the way, millions of Americans ran the numbers and realized the math no longer worked. You cannot save a down payment in a city that eats your paycheck before you've even paid your bills. The second force is lifestyle. About 76% of movers said they wanted the outdoors. Space, sky, a backyard that isn't a shared balcony. After years of feeling packed in, people started craving room to breathe. And rural America has room to spare. That craving is real, and it's emotional, and it matters more than any spreadsheet. The third force is the one that made the other 2 possible. Remote work. For the first time, a huge share of good jobs stopped caring where you live. You could keep the salary and drop the zip code. The invisible chain that tied people to expensive cities, the office, just quietly snapped. And once you can earn city money from a porch in the country, the whole equation flips. Think about it. The exact same job that demanded you live near a downtown tower now lets you file your work from a kitchen table 2,000 miles away. The salary didn't shrink. The cost of living did. That gap, the money you used to hand a landlord and now get to keep, is the fuel behind this entire migration. Cost pushed people out. Lifestyle pulled them away. Remote work opened the door. Put those 3 together, and you don't get a trend. You get a stampede. And when you look at who's leaving and who's gaining, the pattern is almost too clean. The high-cost states, places like Colorado, Massachusetts, and Illinois, posted some of the biggest net losses in the country. Meanwhile, the quiet, less crowded states are pulling in the highest share of new residents. People are trading expensive and packed for cheap and open. And they're doing it by the millions. So let's count them down. Real places, real prices, and the honest catch every single time, because a place isn't real until you know what's wrong with it too. We're starting to count down with the genuinely cheapest land in America. And the numbers on this first one are going to sound made up. Number 15. New Mexico. We're kicking off the countdown here for a reason. New Mexico has some of the cheapest land in the entire country. According to agricultural land data, raw acreage here runs around $725 an acre, the lowest in the nation. Read that again. $725, not a monthly payment. The whole acre? In parts of this state, you can buy a chunk of high desert for less than a used laptop, and people are doing exactly that. The pull is obvious. Wide open mesa country, enormous skies, sunsets that don't look real, and a cost of living that lets a modest income stretch into actual ownership. Down in the southern part of the state, the city of Las Cruces has quietly become one of the hottest inbound destinations in the entire country, drawing in far more people than it loses, better than 3 arrivals for every 2 departures. Now the honest catch. Cheap desert land is cheap for a reason. A lot of it has no water hookup, no power, and no road worth the name. That $700 acre might be miles from the nearest utility pole, and running water and electricity out to it can cost many times what the land did. The land is the down payment. Making it livable is the mortgage. Before you fall in love with a price, ask one question. What will it actually take to live on it? Still, New Mexico proves a promise, and the title is real. Cheap rural land isn't a fantasy. It's out there right now, this cheap, and people are grabbing it. But if raw desert acreage feels like too big a leap, our next stop gives you something warmer, greener, and aimed straight at one specific group of people. Number 14. Arkansas. If New Mexico is the deal on raw land, Arkansas is the deal on a whole life. Land here stays genuinely affordable, property taxes are among the lowest in the country, and here's the one that turns heads. Arkansas doesn't tax military retirement pay. Not a single dollar of it. That one fact has turned the state into a magnet for retired veterans living on a fixed pension. You take a check that gets chewed up in a high-tax state, you move it to the Ozark foothills, and suddenly it covers a paid-off house with land around it. The rivers and forests here draw in the outdoor crowd too. It's green, it's quiet, and it's cheap in a way the coast forgot was even possible. The catch is services. Rural Arkansas can mean a long drive to a real hospital, spotty internet in the hollows, and county roads that flood when the rivers come up. If you rely on regular medical care, map the nearest emergency room before you map anything else. A cheap acre, 2 hours from a doctor, is a different kind of expensive. Arkansas is what a lot of movers would call a soft landing. Warm, green, affordable, welcoming. Our next stop is quieter, colder, and one of the most underrated bargains in the whole country, and almost nobody talks about it. Number 13. Kentucky is one of the most overlooked cheap land states in America, and it barely comes up in these conversations. Out in the eastern hills and the rolling central farmland, you can still find acreage at prices that make coastal buyers think there's a typo in the listing. Homes with a few acres attached routinely cost less than a single year of rent in a major metro. The pull is affordability plus green. Real seasons, deep forests, horse country, and a slower rhythm of life at a price that leaves room to actually breathe. For a modest budget, Kentucky simply hands you more ground than almost anywhere else east of the Mississippi. The catch is terrain and access. A lot of the cheapest land sits in steep, remote Appalachian country where the internet is thin, the jobs are far, and the winters bring ice that shuts down mountain roads for days. That gorgeous wooded hillside might be beautiful and also nearly impossible to run a driveway up. Beautiful, yes. Convenient, no. Walk it before you love it. Kentucky is cheap, green, and gentle. Our next stop trades the hills for wide-open flat country and a cost of living that's hard to argue with, as long as you can handle what falls out of the sky. Number 12. Oklahoma is quietly one of the best value plays in the country for someone who wants land and a low cost of living without any fuss. Acreage is cheap. Homes are cheap, and the cost of everyday life sits well below the national average. Your money simply goes further the moment you cross the state line. The pull is practicality. Flat, usable land, a central location, and prices that let a working family or a retiree actually own outright, not rent to own forever. This isn't the postcard fantasy, it's the sensible, affordable reality. And for a whole lot of people, that's exactly the point. The catch is the sky. Oklahoma sits square in tornado country, and severe weather is a genuine part of life here. A storm shelter isn't a luxury on the plains. It's a normal line item, the way a basement is somewhere else. Plenty of people live their whole lives here without a scratch. But you plan for it. You don't pretend it away. Oklahoma gives you cheap and flat and sensible. Our next stop gives you something rarer in the bargain world: cheap land with water running right through it. Number 11. Down in the Missouri Ozarks, you get something almost impossible to find at this price. Cheap land with water, springs, rivers, lakes, and green rolling hills at prices that stay reasonable because the region flies completely under the radar. For a lot of buyers, this is the sweet spot between affordable and actually livable. The pull is that rare combination of low cost and real natural beauty. Float trips, fishing, deep forests, and small towns where a dollar still stretches. You can find wooded acreage here for a fraction of what waterfront anything costs almost anywhere else in the country. The catch is remoteness and terrain. The prettiest Ozark land is often steep, heavily wooded, and far from a real hospital or a decent job market. And that same water that makes it special also means some parcels sit in flood-prone bottoms that turn into a lake every spring. Know where the water goes when it rains before you build, because the same river that sells you the land can flood the house you put on it. The Ozarks are cheap, green, and central. Our next stop keeps the warm and cheap, and quietly skips the brutal winters that plague half the places on this list. Number 10. Alabama keeps landing on the lists of the most affordable places to live in America, and for good reason. Low home prices, low property taxes, and a mild climate that skips the deep freezes hammering the northern half of this countdown. For a warm, cheap, easy landing, it's genuinely hard to beat. The pull is comfort and cost together. You get green countryside, a long growing season, and a cost of living that lets a modest income live comfortably instead of just surviving. No shoveling snow, no $1,000 heating bills in January. The catch is the trade you make for that mild winter. Summers are hot and humid, the kind of humid that fogs your glasses the second you step outside, and this is hurricane and severe storm territory the closer you get to the coast. Services in the most rural counties can also be thin. Cheap and warm is real here, but so is the weather, and you plan your house and your budget around both. Alabama is warm and easy. Our next stop might be the single best-kept secret on this entire countdown, because it isn't just cheap land, it's some of the cheapest actual houses in the country. Number 9. West Virginia has some of the lowest home prices in the whole nation. Not just cheap land, cheap houses, actual roofs over actual heads for numbers that sound like a down payment somewhere else. And here's the pull that pushed it onto the map. To fight decades of people leaving, the state started paying remote workers to move in, offering thousands of dollars in cash and perks to anyone who brings an out-of-state job with them. Combine that with cheap homes and some of the most beautiful mountain country in the East, the rivers, the ridges, the whitewater, and suddenly, people who never thought about West Virginia are paying close attention. The catch is the same story that made the homes cheap in the first place. Many rural areas here have lost jobs and population for years, which means thin services, long drives, and internet that can be a real problem in the hollows. If your whole plan depends on that remote paycheck, a dead connection isn't an inconvenience. It's the end of the plan. Check the actual internet speed at the actual address before you fall for the view. West Virginia is the East Coast bargain nobody talks about. Our next stop is a genuine curveball, because it turns out not everyone running from the city is running toward the sun. Number 8. Rural Maine. Up in far northern Maine, in the vast, quiet stretches near the Canadian border, you can find some of the cheapest wooded land in the entire Northeast. Big parcels, deep forest, total privacy, and prices that shock people who only know the pretty coastal postcard version of Maine. The pull is solitude and cost. If you want to genuinely disappear into the trees, own real acreage, and pay very little for it, this remote corner delivers like almost nowhere else in the eastern United States. For the right person, that emptiness is the entire dream. The catch is honest, and it's a big one. The winters up here are long, deep, and serious. The growing season is short enough to make a real garden a challenge, and you will be a genuine distance from just about everything, including medical care. Getting snowed in isn't a story you tell later, it's a normal week in February. This is land for people who truly want to be left alone and understand exactly what that costs. Maine is the far end of the map. Our next stop swings back to the middle, to the state that's quietly becoming everyone's favorite compromise. Number 7. Tennessee is the compromise a lot of movers are quietly falling in love with. Cheaper than the coasts, but not the far frontier. Rolling green hills, real towns, and no state income tax on your paycheck. You get the country without going completely off-grid. The pull is the balance. You can find land and a home within an hour of a real city with a real airport and a real hospital, while still paying a fraction of what the same setup costs in California or the Northeast. That's exactly why people from high-cost states keep landing here in a steady stream. The catch is that the secret is well and truly out. The most popular corners of Tennessee are getting more expensive every year as demand climbs, and the flood of newcomers has pushed prices in the hot spots to levels that would have shocked a local a few years back. The bargain is real, but it's shrinking, and the best deals now sit a county or two farther out than they used to. Get in early or get in remote. Tennessee is where people slow down. Our next stop is where they go big, wide open country, no income tax, and enough room to lose yourself. Number 6. Rural Texas. Everybody knows people are moving to Texas, but the real story isn't the big cities. It's the wide open, rural stretches, especially out in the Panhandle and the West, where land is still affordable and there's no state income tax at all. The pull is size and freedom. You can buy serious acreage here for a reasonable price, run it however you like, and keep your entire paycheck. For folks fleeing high-tax states, that no-income tax line is a powerful magnet, and Texas has more of this empty country than almost anyone realizes. The catch is water and property taxes. Texas has no income tax, but property taxes can be surprisingly steep. So run those numbers carefully before you celebrate. And in the dry western half of the state, water is everything. A cheap parcel with no reliable water is a hard place to build a life, no matter how good the price looked. Ask about the well, ask about the aquifer, and ask how deep your neighbors had to drill before anything else. Rural Texas is big, dry, and free. Our next stop is emptier still, and it's built for a very specific kind of person, the kind who wants space and can't stand the tax man. Number 5. Wyoming is the answer for people who want wide open space and hate paying taxes. There is no state income tax here, land can still be found at reasonable prices, and the whole state has fewer people than a single mid-sized city, spread across an enormous landscape. If your idea of paradise is not seeing your neighbors, this is it. The pull is freedom and low taxes. Plain and simple. Big skies, big country, and a government that takes very little out of your paycheck. That's a serious draw for remote workers and retirees trying to keep every last dollar they earn. Real quick, if these real places and real numbers are useful to you, do us one small favor and tap that like button. It genuinely helps this kind of honest, fact-checked video reach more people who are trying to make the exact same decision you are. That's it. Now, the catch on Wyoming. The catch is wind, winter, and true isolation. Wyoming can be punishingly cold and relentlessly windy, the kind of wind that rocks the truck on the highway, and some towns are a very long way from a hospital, a store, or another living soul. When we say remote, we mean an hour's drive for a gallon of milk. That emptiness is the whole appeal, and it's also the whole risk, and only you can decide which side of that line you land on. Wyoming is empty on purpose. Our next stop is the dream at the very center of this whole migration, and it's cheaper than you think. Number 4. Montana. Now we get to the big one. Montana is the place people picture when they close their eyes and imagine escape. Mountains that don't quit. Rivers full of trout. Sky that goes on forever. And here's the part that surprises people. It's cheaper than they expect. Nationally, farmland averages around $5,110 an acre. In Montana, it runs closer to $2,900. That's roughly half the national price for some of the most jaw-dropping country in all of North America. For the money you'd spend on a cramped condo in a coastal city, you can own a real piece of Montana with mountains sitting right on your horizon. But Montana does not hand you anything for free. The catch is isolation, weather, and water. Towns are far apart. Winters are brutal and long. And out here, water rights are their own complicated world with more than a century of law behind them. That gorgeous creek running through your land may legally belong to someone downstream, and you may not be allowed to touch it. In the West, water is worth more than the dirt, and people have gone to court over a stream you could step across. Know exactly what you're buying before you sign, because in Montana, the map doesn't tell you who owns the water. Montana is the dream. Our next stop is the one we promised you at the very start, the single most surprising destination on this entire list. Number 3. And this is the one we teased. South Dakota. We told you the top surprise on this countdown isn't warm, isn't famous, and isn't where you'd guess. Here it is. When the migration data got sorted, South Dakota came out as the #1 rural destination in the entire country. Not Florida, not Texas, South Dakota. So why on earth are people flooding into a state most Americans only think about when they see a photo of Mount Rushmore? 2 words, no taxes. South Dakota has no state income tax, and land out on the prairie is still genuinely cheap by any coastal standard. For a retiree or a remote worker, that combination is quietly enormous. You keep more of every dollar, and the dollars you keep buy more land. But you already know there's a catch. Winter. South Dakota winters are long, hard, and genuinely dangerous. Wind screams across open prairie with nothing to slow it down, and blizzards can close roads for days at a time. Your driveway can vanish under a drift overnight. This is not a place you drift into casually. It rewards people who plan, who stock the pantry, who own a good generator, and it punishes the ones who don't. South Dakota is the surprise. Our next stop is no surprise at all to the people already there, because more Americans are moving in per person than anywhere else in the country. Number 2, Idaho. If you want to know where Americans are voting with their feet the hardest, look at Idaho. When you measure how many people move in for every one who moves out, Idaho leads the entire country with roughly 2 people arriving for every one who leaves. That's not steady growth. That's a wave. The draw is a certain kind of freedom. Mountains, rivers, low taxes, and a wide-open feeling that pulls in remote workers and families who want space and independence. It photographs like a postcard. And honestly, it lives like one too, if you can manage to get in. The honest catch here is the one nobody likes to say out loud. So many people have already arrived that prices in the popular areas have jumped hard, and some longtime locals aren't thrilled about the flood of newcomers reshaping their towns. You may pay more than you expected. You may find bidding wars on land that used to sit for months, and you may need to earn your welcome instead of assuming it. The wave that makes Idaho exciting is the same wave that's pricing people right back out of it. Idaho is the fastest growing story in the country, but when you sort the migration data by state and ask which one is winning overall, the answer, our number one, is somewhere else entirely. Number one, South Carolina. When you rank the states by where Americans are actually landing, South Carolina climbs right to the very top as the number one destination in the country. And it kind of ties this whole story together. The pull is everything people have been chasing all along, gathered into one place. A warm climate, a lower cost of living than the states people are fleeing, a long coastline, real towns, and land and homes that still cost far less than the crowded coasts up north. It's affordable, it's mild, and it's welcoming, and that's precisely why more Americans are choosing it than anywhere else on this list. The catch is the one that comes with success. The most popular areas are growing fast, prices are climbing, and the coast carries real hurricane risk. The bargain is genuine. But like every single place on this countdown, it comes with a trade you have to plan for, not pretend away. So step back for a second, because here's what 15 million people actually figured out. This was never really about dirt. It was never really about acres or price per square foot. It was about a decision. The decision that a paid-off patch of quiet is worth more than a lifetime of rent on someone else's building. That keeping your own money beats impressing your neighbors. That space and ownership and a little room to breathe are worth trading a shorter commute and a busier social calendar for. Think about what that actually feels like, waking up and owing no landlord anything, looking out a window at land that has your name on it, watching your grocery money and your gas money and your tax money finally add up to something you get to keep instead of something that disappears the first of every month. That's the feeling 15 million people chased. Not luxury, not status, just the quiet math of a life you can actually afford. 15 million people looked at that math, weighed the trade-offs honestly, and decided the land was worth it. The winters, the wells, the long drives, the thin services, the storm shelters, all of it. They put it on the scale with their eyes wide open, and they went anyway. That's the part that should stick with you. They didn't just run from something. They walked toward something on purpose, with a calculator in one hand and a map in the other. None of this is financial or relocation advice. And here's the one rule we would stake our name on. Migration numbers and land prices change through the year, so verify every figure yourself and never ever buy a piece of land you haven't walked with your own 2 feet. A cheap acre you can't actually live on isn't a bargain. It's a lesson, and it's an expensive one. But the door those 15 million people walk through is still wide open. The cheap land is real, the trade-offs are real, and the choice is genuinely yours to make. You don't have to join them. Plenty of people love their city and wouldn't leave for anything, and that's a perfectly good answer too. But now you know it was never a fantasy. It was a decision, and it's one you're allowed to make for yourself. If you want more honest, fact-checked breakdowns of where Americans are really moving and what it truly costs, subscribe and stick around. We do the digging, so you don't have to. We'll see you on the next one.